We're making good progress through this Kimura system. I'm trying to give you a sense of direction. So far, the main concepts we've worked at is the idea that the Kimura system splits in two the moment you get a hold of a Kimura. The moment you lock that figure of four, there's two directions you can go. You can either work to get your opponent's hand behind the back. That's the direction of breaking your opponent. Or you can work with the hand in front. That's the direction of restraining your opponent. So the two faces of Kimura, breaking on the one hand and restraining on the other, are both manifested in the system. We've seen if we're going to go the direction of breaking, the first thing we want to work with is good breaking mechanics. And we saw quite a few details in that direction. We saw that if we can't get our opponent's hand behind the back with our hands, the right thing to do is to apply our legs into the Kimura and use the strength of our legs and hips to enact breaking mechanics. If for whatever reason that proves to be something you're not interested in, the other two strategies are to switch to another switch to another form of submission hold, or switch to a completely different position / attacking system, such as the back, for example. We're going to look now at an absolutely critical part of my approach to Kimura. This is, as it were, a system within a system. This is the so-called T Kimura position. The reason why T Kimura is so important is because it almost always occurs in any kind of uncontrolled scramble situation when you first enter into a Kimura. And many of the most innovative and useful methods that we as a team use to enter into Kimura result directly in this T Kimura position. Once you understand the nuances of the T Kimura position, you are going to be able to take what most people see as neutral, uncontrolled situations and go immediately on the attack and create a lot of danger for your opponent. Now understand something from the start. The T Kimura is a restraining position. You can hold someone down long enough to get moves to work. It's not a submission position. Whenever I go to submit somebody with Kimura, I must be chest to chest. Think about it. If Mateus is down and I'm chest to chest, yes, I have an excellent chance of finishing. If I'm in bottom position and Mateus is on top of me, but we are chest to chest, from here I have an excellent chance of finishing. We're chest to chest. In order to apply a submission hold with Kimura, our two chests must face each other. In the case of T Kimura, our chests don't face each other. They both point in the same direction. So this is not a way to finish people. It's a way to restrain them into a situation where we can move on and go into other attacks. But it's this halfway house. When we first get contact on your opponent, you restrain them with a T Kimura in the middle of a scramble, and then from there, gain control of them and either go towards a finish or some other form of attack. First, let's have a look at what is a T Kimura. Okay, we're going to have a situation where Mateus is lying down and his body will form the stem of a T. My body will form the hat of a T, and we will be perpendicular to each other in a T shape. So my body goes across his, and I have a Kimura. You can see that both of our chests face up to the ceiling. So there's no submission hold from here. It's impossible. The only way you can submit someone with Kimura is if your chest faces their chest. Okay? But you can restrain them. If Mateus tries to turn away from me, the Kimura will make it impossible. If Mateus just stays where he is and doesn't move, it's so easy for me to use my leg like a pendulum and come up on top and restrain him. The only direction he can go, and the only one that makes sense, is for him to turn into me. If he can succeed in turning into me, there's a chance he might get up all the way and even escape the hold and end up on top of me. Okay? So the battle lines of the T Kimura position are pretty easy to set. We know that it's not of any value as a submission hold, but it's of tremendous value as a restraining hold. We can hold someone down long enough to get our attacks to work. We know that they can't turn away from us. We know that they can't stay still. So their options are limited to turning into us. Once you understand this basic element of the T Kimura position, you're on your path to success. An obvious question is, if the only thing they can do is turn into us, what can I do to make that difficult? And the answer comes down to your opponent's elbow. Let's face the other way, Mateus, so people can see what we're talking about here. From a situation where I have a T Kimura, I'm lying in this position here. As Mateus goes to turn into me, there's a fascinating battle here for elbow position. If Mateus's elbow comes inside my elbow, he wins every single time. Okay? Think about what Mateus needs to be able to do to get up from this position towards me. He has to get his elbow to the mat. If I hold Mateus's elbow up like this, and he's not allowed to move his elbow, and he tries to turn into me, he looks like a 90-year-old man. He'll never get up. But if Mateus can pull his elbow in towards his own body down to the floor, he can whip up like an athlete, and he's up very quickly. Okay? So the whole battle here is for elbow position. He wants his elbow inside my bicep and elbow, and I want his elbow on the outside of my bicep and elbow. I always want my elbow underneath his. If I can keep my elbow underneath his and Mateus goes to get up, go as hard as you can, Mateus, I just lift his elbow and I keep it off the floor. Go hard, buddy, go. And it's so difficult for him to get up. But if my elbow bends and folds and he can get his elbow to the mat, he can get up on me. Even worse is the situation where his elbow goes inside. Now he'll really get up on me. I've got nothing. Okay? So I always want my elbow underneath and inside his. And I always want his elbow elevated. Mateus, go to explode up as hard as you can. And that's what holds him in place. Even when he scissors his legs and works hard, it slows him down to a degree where I can get good work done from this position. Okay? You will be pleasantly surprised how even if the guy did get up on you and successfully got up to the knees, just by lifting the elbow, you can put him back down. Don't underestimate the power of a lever and a fulcrum. The magic of lever and fulcrum is essentially the magic of jiu-jitsu. And here, as my opponent goes to get up, that's exactly what I've got. I'm dominating the end of the lever. So even as he gets up and faces me and looks towards my body, make a strong base, Mateus. Even from a situation like this, you can turn your opponent down to the mat with a simple application of lever and fulcrum. You have to learn to have confidence in this. You can't have situations where he gets up and you're like, oh, he's on top of me, let me let go and just go back to guard. Okay? Have faith that unless his elbow gets inside, if his elbow gets inside, that's killed your fulcrum and lever. You're done now. You've got to switch to something else. Okay? But as long as my elbow is dominating the inside position and he goes to get up, even if he got all the way up, such is the power of the lever and fulcrum in this position, you can always return him to the mat. Okay? Now, as my training partner goes to get up, a word to the wise. There's often a lot of stress on your hands and wrists when this happens. You get a strong physical guy on top, good athlete, and he comes up, you feel like, man, my Kimura hand is hurting here. Okay? Don't be intimidated by this. Turn your hand palm up. Unlock your figure of four. Okay? Here's the Kimura, locked. If Mateus explosively turns into me, I feel it's all in my hands. It's like, ooh, that hurt. Okay? And you want to let go. Don't. Turn your hand palm up and curl your wrist backwards. Now, as he comes into me, the figure four is maintained. He explosively turns in, and you cannot turn in. All I do now is just lift, and I just sit him down. Okay? This is the way to increase your effect. It seems counterintuitive. You think, oh, wait, I should be stronger with a figure four lock. No, you're not. Okay? Open the figure of four, palm up, and curl your wrist backwards. No grip. Now, go back down, Mateus. So we're going to have a simple test there. Mateus is going to explode up from bottom position, and you'll just practice putting him down. And I often have my athletes practice just in this T Kimura position. One man comes up, and we just practice sitting him down. When he first comes up, I lift the elbow. It's hard for him to get up. Then I let him get up, and we practice sitting him back down. Okay? practice like this, you soon develop a lot of faith in the power of lever and fulcrum from this T Kimura position. You'll understand that your opponent cannot turn away. He's physically restrained in that direction. He would be a fool if he stayed where he is, because I can just get up on top of him and pin him. And his only real option is to turn into me. This creates a simple battle for elbow position. If I use an open Kimura grip and I focus upon making it difficult for him to get up by lifting his elbow consistently off the floor, and if he does get up and gets his elbow to the mat, have faith that you can always return him where he came from with that simple extension of lever and fulcrum and return him to the mat. Pretty soon you're going to realize the T Kimura position is an incredibly useful device for controlling and restraining your opponent's movement in ways that take you towards submission holds. We're looking at the crucial T Kimura position. This is a position of restraint where I can hold my opponent down long enough that I can get effective attacking options to bear upon him. We've seen that initially, when we first get into the T Kimura position, it's a battle for elbow position. My opponent always wants to come up on top of me. He can't turn away, can't stay still, he's got to turn into me. His ability to do so will be determined by his elbow position. If he can get his elbow inside, or even just get his elbow to the mat, he's got a good chance of turning up into me. I, on the other hand, have an excellent chance to keep him pinned down using his elbow and forearm as a lever to put him down repeatedly and set up my own attacks. Now, I have a fundamental choice in how I go to attack from a T Kimura. I can initiate my attacks with my bottom knee or my top knee. Let's have a look now at exactly what this means. We're going to start off in a T Kimura situation. And we've seen there's an obvious battle here for elbow position. Okay, if my opponent was naive and just stayed where he was, well, there's no reason why I can't just come up on top and pin him. So of course he's going to be looking to turn up into us. We've seen that as we control our opponent's elbow position, he fights to get up on top. That's the critical point right there. He comes up to a single hip, just like so. If he goes any further, he's up to his knees. Okay, and we have to return him down. I don't want him flat on his back, then I can't use my knees to attack very effectively. So as my opponent comes up to his elbow, that gives me space to penetrate with the bottom knee. Once we work with the bottom knee, we have a whole host of ways we can go on the attack here. Okay, and we're going to see a bunch of them. That's what happens when I go in with the bottom knee. The other alternative is for me to use the lever and fulcrum to put him down to his back and shoulders. And from here, I'm going to put my own head on the floor and come across with my top knee. So now it's the top knee that goes over his body. And as a result, I can come up into a good attacking position on top of my training partner. So I have two fundamental choices. If my opponent gets up, I go in with the bottom knee and I do all my attacks from bottom knee position. If I'm able to keep my opponent's two shoulders on the mat, I will put my top leg over as a cross face, so when he tries to come up, the head is blocked by my leg, and as a result I'm able now to come up with my top knee into a good attacking position. How I go to attack my opponent will be one of these two choices. I'm either going to penetrate with bottom knee and go into a series of attacks that we're just about to look at, or I'll come over the top with the top knee and go into a different form of attacks. So we have a split in the T Kimura position between bottom knee attacks and top knee attacks. Let's start off in a T Kimura position when my opponent turns into me. We're going to penetrate with the bottom knee and we're going to use that position to take our opponent's back. So we've locked up here and my opponent starts turning up into us. We've seen there's a good opportunity for us now to punch that bottom knee inside just like so. Now as Mateus goes to get up, I'm going to throw my second leg over as a hook. Okay, as he fights to get up to his base now, it's quite easy for us to extend our second leg through. We're in the perfect position now as my opponent goes to turn up to take our top hand off and then throw our hand across. So I have two hooks. I don't want Mateus to get up inside my legs and into my guard. That's not what we're looking for. So it's important in these situations that I get my hand in here. I take my second hand back like so. As Mateus goes to get up, I must take my head higher than his. If Mateus's head is higher than mine and he turns, he comes into my guard. So the whole battle here is for head height. So when I take my hand here, the thumb comes in, I focus on building a base where my head goes higher than his. Right now my base is limited to my elbow. Mateus is on his elbow, I'm on my elbow. As a result, our heads are the same height. So to truly build a base, I put weight on my left arm and I come to a hand. So now I have a height advantage. As Mateus goes to get up, I just get my elbow to the floor, and now we go across and we have a good back position. Once again, we start off in a chi kimura situation, just like so. My opponent goes to turn into me. We bring our knee through inside. My second foot hooks over the top. From this position, I come up and hook. Now we're both on our elbow. As Mateus continues up, we're in the perfect position to go through and get our hooks in, and we're in business. Alternatively, a second way we can get the back. This time, as Mateus comes up, we bring our knee inside. We pass our second foot over the top. As Mateus goes to get up on top of me, I use my elbow to lift him, and I use my left leg to turn him across the body. As a result, I'm in a good position now to hug his arm, bring my arm around, and from here, we're in the perfect position to go through into our usual back attacks. Once again, from a chi kimura position start, Mateus does a good job of coming up on top. I bring my knee through, I take my foot over his hip, and from this position, as he fights to get up on top, I use that lever to lift him over. I hug the arm, bring my arm around the corner, and there's our feet in the perfect position to lock up the back. In these two ways, we can turn that bottom knee penetration right into various forms of back control. Now let's look at another example of working from a chi kimura position and using that bottom knee to get into a good attack. Again, we start off in the chi kimura situation, just like so. As Mateus goes to get up, we know now we can always punch that knee inside. As he fights his way up, I use my elbow on his elbow to slow him down. When I try to throw my hook in, I notice that his knee is up and forward, and as a result, it's hard for me to get my hook inside. If I cannot get my foot inside the hip, an excellent alternative is for me to take my foot over my training partner's shoulder. Now, as Mateus goes to turn into me, I simply open my knee. As my knee opens, we find ourselves in the perfect position to turn our training partner over. I'm going to release my kimura and take his knuckles into my chest, so that as Mateus goes to spin out of the lock, it's surprisingly difficult. We lock an initial triangle, then we hand assist it and get our shoelaces to our training partner's back, and as a result, we can quickly lock up a stranglehold. So we're using the shoulder as a long lever to keep our opponent down. Once again, we start off just then like so. Mateus goes to turn up into me. We focus as he comes up hard on getting our knee underneath and keeping his elbow off the floor. Now I bring my knee up behind his head. Don't try to throw from a low elbow in low knee position. You'll never get the knee over. Bring your knee behind the head and then hook over the pectoral muscle. Now as he spins into me, we use our leg to turn him over. We're in the perfect position to come up and connect the knuckles to the chest. I fall and lock my legs like so. Off the initial lock, we hand assist. Our shoelaces go behind the back, and then we focus on connecting the knuckles to the chest so the strangle comes on immediately. In this way, we can use that same bottom knee penetration to attack very effectively out of a T Kimura. Once again, we're working from the T Kimura position. As Mateus works his way up, we've seen that we can slow him down at the elbow so that we can come through with our foot. As the knee comes through underneath our training partner, we're going to get opportunities to bring our leg over our training partner's shoulder and start to correct their body over to the side. As we do so, instead of going into Ushiro Senkaku, the rear triangle, we simply slip our foot over our training partner's head. As always from here, we come up so that our head is over our training partner's hands. In situations like this, I always favor passing the foot through so that we lock up the so-called three-quarter juji gatame rather than a traditional juji. And as a result, when my opponent goes to spin out of the lock, he finds it very difficult to get past the control of head and shoulders, and we're in a strong finishing position. Just demonstrating from a different angle. From here, we start off, our opponent comes up explosively from bottom position, and we bring our knee underneath. We pass our foot over the top of the shoulder and return our training partner down to the mat. As he fights to defend his arms, etc., we pass our foot through and second leg goes over. As always from these situations, we're always looking to pass our foot inside and underneath our training partner's arm and lock up the so-called three-quarter juji gatame. As a result, from here we begin to straighten out the arm, and when he goes to turn out of the lock, the three-quarter juji proves to be very, very strong at controlling head and shoulders and creating strong breaks. This is a nice way to turn a T Kimura situation into a strong arm lock attack. Working once again from the T Kimura position, we see our opponent comes explosively up on top of us. We've seen this idea of getting our knee in as a wedge underneath their hip and lat muscle, so we have some ability now to hold and control them. Now, from here, we saw previously that we were able to get our foot over our training partner's shoulder and lock on. This time, a different method. I'm going to go over my training partner's near side head, and when I hook on, my opponent's arm is in a position where I can slip my arm through underneath their elbow. As a result, I can push off my bottom leg and push my opponent back down. I use this side triangle position to lock up an initial lock with my feet. I reinforce it by holding the elbow joint, unlocking my feet, and straightening out my whole body around their head, so that when I come back and relock, we find ourselves in a devastating strangle position. Okay, I'll demonstrate on the other side so that you can see what was happening with the legs. Once again, we start off in a T Kimura type situation. My opponent comes explosively up on top, and we focus on getting our knee inside. I pass my leg across, and it fits underneath my training partner's armpit, just like so. As a result, I can push off my bottom leg and send my legs through. The initial lock is not very impressive, so there has to be a period of adjustment where I lock the elbow, I put my bottom foot on the floor, and I turn my body belly down, so that when I relock, we get a good tight coverage of the triangle. Now we go back to a Kimura, and from here we strangle for the finish. In this way, the T Kimura can easily be converted into a Yoko Senkaku or side triangle, which is a fine way to strangle people. And of course, as we saw earlier, there's two very good Kimuras on both near arm and far arm. Now we're looking at this idea of T Kimura as this system within a system, so to speak. And a large part of what my students do when they work with Kimura is out of this T Kimura position. It's crucial that we have a clear sense of direction. If you get good at T Kimura position, you'll be able to take wild, uncontrolled scrambles, situations where you have no real control of your opponent, quickly lock up a Kimura, tumble into a T Kimura position, and then dictate the pace of the match from that position. So far, we're looking at two broad ways in which we can attack from a T Kimura. There are bottom knee attacks and there are top knee attacks. So far, we're only looking at the bottom knee. Let's look at another version of bottom knee control, which enables us to go into what we call the Russian arm. A Russian arm refers to any situation where my training partner's arm, if you're on two knees, Matthias, is caught across the body. Okay? When Matthias's arm goes across the center line, and I have a control of his arm like so, that severely reduces Matthias's ability to base out on the right side of his body, because his right arm is controlled across the center line, regardless of how I grip. Like so, like so, like so. They all have this common property that the arm is brought across the center line in a way where Matthias cannot base out with his arm. If his arm were over here and I went for any sweep to my left, he could use his right arm as a base of support. But when the arm is caught in the Russian arm position, he has no capacity to base out on that side. This is going to greatly facilitate sweeps, for example, in that direction. Now, we can use the T Kimura to get to a Russian arm. The beauty of the Russian arm is that when your opponent's arm is trapped in this position, even if you're on bottom, you will have a position which you have a significant tactical advantage over your opponent. So let's start off in a T Kimura and show how we can get to a Russian arm. We'll go this way. So here we are. We know what the fundamental rules of this engagement are. If my opponent turns away from me, his own Kimura will stop him. If he stays still, we just come up and pin him. So he has to turn into us. We know that. As he goes to turn in, we know there's a battle here for the elbow, where we want to lift and frustrate him at the elbow. As a result, there's always going to be space to get my knee inside. But there's always going to be that explosive guy who manages to get his elbow to the floor, and despite your best attempts, he gets up all the way to his knees. You tried your best and it didn't work. He got up. Don't worry, there's still good things you can do. You still have his arm pinned across the center line. In other words, you still have a Russian arm. So from here, as my knee comes in, I'm going to take my second foot and place it in here as a butterfly hook. Now, I'm going to lift up on his elbow and bring my second knee across, and my hand is going to catch my training partner. As Matthias goes to pull away from me, I'm going to sit up and take the Russian arm, so that my head is on one side and the Russian arm is on the other. We're in the perfect position now to go on the attack. There's several good ways I can go on the attack here. One is to maintain the grip on the lat muscle and the grip on the bicep and keep my head in close. So when Matthias goes to pull away from me, I just hold at the forearm here. When he goes to yank his arm free, it's surprisingly difficult. And it's relatively simple for me to put my foot, my left foot, in his left thigh, and then start an action of falling back and lifting so that he goes up into the air. I keep my ear on his chest, so when he tries to turn into me, it's difficult. If my head is upright, he can quickly spin into me and cause problems. So I put my ear on his chest. Then all we do is put up a post leg, bring the second leg in, and we end up in a good pin across our training partner's side. Okay, so let's have a look at this again from a T Kimura position. Here we are in the T Kimura. My training partner goes to explode up to his base, and my knee comes in, but he does a good job of coming in and getting to his knees. I take my foot and thread it in as a butterfly hook. I bring my second leg around the corner, and as my hand comes back, I sit up and hook. Now from this position, I slide in. As I go to lift my training partner up in the air, initially it's two legs lifting, but ultimately, once his hips come over mine, my right leg will come out, and it will be my left leg that sustains the position. From the left leg, I pull with my left arm, and as a result, he falls. We use our left leg as a pendulum to get our ear to his chest. As he goes to get up, my head pins him long enough that I can bring my arm to the other side, lift, and put the wedge underneath to settle into a good pin. And this is a very useful way to take advantage of the Russian arm and win from the T Kimura position. We're looking at this T Kimura position, which gives us excellent control over our opponent, enough that as he does the only thing he can really do, which is to turn up into us, we can turn this into useful attacks. From a Chi Kimura situation, we just looked at the idea of a Russian arm. We can use that same Russian arm to go into Ashigarami. So as my opponent turns up into me, we know now it's a battle for elbow position. Okay, as I bring my knee inside and my opponent starts coming up, or as he gets all the way up to his base, we take our outside hook and that becomes a butterfly hook. Now, even if my opponent brings his elbow inside, we still have forearm to forearm action here. Okay, now if I just stay on my back and my opponent viciously pulls his arm, he's gone. Okay, so what I need to do in these situations is immediately hook behind this leg here, and that will help me as he goes to pull away, bring my head to the opposite shoulder. Okay, we never come up head to head. That's obviously a training disaster. We always go up head to opposite shoulder. When he goes to yank out now, this is what prevents him yanking out. This hand. If I just held like this, he could easily yank out. It'd be easy. Okay? But when I hold here, I pull his shoulder under my armpit. When he goes to yank out, it's shockingly difficult. Now, I bring him up with two legs. Once his hips are over my hips, I relinquish one leg. And I start an action of turning his body. I want him to turn out in this direction, so we can catch our training partner and end up in the perfect position to hold, lock, and from here we can go into our finishes. Once again, from a Chi Kimura position, not many of your opponents will be expecting a inside heel hook from this position. It's not really a traditional heel hooking position. But as my opponent comes up, we know we can get that knee inside. As my opponent explosively comes up to his base, we put our foot inside. Even as we feel him go to pull away, boom, we come in here and lock. Now, I bring him down and I get him up in the air, two legs. Once we have him up in the air, I can relinquish the leg. And now I focus on turning him around the corner. Don't drop him straight to the side. Remember, you need this leg. So we have to be able to turn the man. That means taking him at an angle, almost out in this direction. So you end up with the legs locked in place. I catch and set up. Switch, feed, and lock. In this way, we can turn that Chi Kimura into a fine leg locking entrance. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Russian arm. I try to incorporate it as much as I can in every grappling situation I'm in, whether it be with a gi or without a gi. But I'd be a liar if I said to you, you're always going to be able to control the Russian arm from a Kimura position. Okay, you have a sufficiently strong, sweaty, explosive opponent. There's going to come times you come up with what you thought was a nice, tight Russian arm, and he will pull the arm free. And I should still be able to be effective under those circumstances. So, we're going to start off in our Chi Kimura position. We lock up like so, and Mateus explosively comes up from bottom position. We've seen we're penetrating with the bottom knee. That never really changes. As he comes up hard from bottom position, we take our butterfly hook and hook it in just like so. We hook, we hold, and as I come forward, Mateus pulls the arm free. Now, let's understand something about losing the Russian arm. The only way I can lose the Russian arm is if my opponent posts his second arm on the floor. Why? Well, if Mateus took this hand off the floor, he would have no pull on the Russian arm. I can easily hold him, no matter how strong, sweaty, or slippery he is. But when he puts this hand on the mat, now he can use one hand to push while the other hand pulls, and now he can pull away from me. Okay? So let's understand this. If I'm going to lose the Russian arm, I'm always able to gain the other arm. So as I try to hold on to Mateus and he explosively pulls away, he will always surrender the second arm to me. It has to be that way. Otherwise, he never would have got out of the first Russian arm. Now, I post my bottom knee, the foot of my bottom knee leg on the mat, and I just turn my whole body out to the other side. And from here, we're going to go into a very specialized arm lock called Urigatami. Now, Urigatami is a move that you will often see people attempt but you will very rarely see people actually finish with it. So I'm just going to quickly go over some details of the way I hit an Urigatami. It's a little bit different from most, and then we'll go back to the T Kimura position. So first, just a few words on Urigatami as a lock. Okay, if you look at the way most people teach in Urigatami, you'll see something like this. Two knees pinched around their training partner's head and shoulders, and then you'll see a variety of ways in which people go to control the arm. You'll see some people two hands, you'll see some people fold their arms over the top, you'll see a variety of ways things are done here. Okay, whenever I go to attack Urigatami, I configure my legs a little differently from most. Instead of focusing on pinching my knees, what I do is I take my knee and I put it here as a wedge in front of the shoulder. So I have a cross-face wedge. Why? Because my opponent's primary defense is to bring his head towards me. Okay? And if he can bring the head towards me, he can rotate his elbow and free himself. Okay? So that's a common problem we find with Urigatami. So I put a wedge in front. Now the problem with putting a wedge in front is now I have nothing stopping him moving away. If I had my knee in the conventional position and Mateus goes to move away, my two knees can make it difficult for him. But now I've got two knees in front, there's nothing stopping him, and now I can just slip out like spaghetti. Okay? So what do? I take my bottom foot and I hook it here behind my training partner's armpit. And it actively hooks and controls. So my two knees pinch around. Okay? When Mateus goes to yank away from me in any given direction, it feels incredibly difficult. Now I take my elbow and I point it at his ear. Remember, from Mateus's perspective, he wants to be able to rotate his elbow defensively this way. That's what he wants. The only way I can really make that difficult for him is by pointing my elbow at his ear. Instead of locking like this, where the elbow can easily turn inside my arms, or like this, which is not much of an improvement, when I go elbow to elbow and then reinforce my own elbow, I get into the strongest breaking mechanics of them all. Instead of merely compressing down with my arms, I move my hips away from Mateus and I move my head towards him. Okay? So this is breaking point, but I can still move much further. Okay? So once again, just the mechanics of an Urigatami, a little different from most. From any situation where I'm threatening an Urigatami, instead of using a conventional two knees around method, we use the knee as a crossface and the foot as a hook here. Very often, my second leg will go across like so. Now, just with the legs alone, when Mateus goes to yank out, it's surprisingly difficult. When he tries to push in, that too is surprisingly difficult. When we bring the elbow to the ear and move in the manner we prescribed, we get tremendous finishing pressure. So, let's tie those mechanics of Urigatami together with the move that we looked at. So we're going to start off in a T Kimura situation. From here, Mateus does a good job of exploding into us, and we bring everything inside. Okay? Now, from that inside position, Mateus does a good job of just violently yanking the arm out back, and we lose it. So we immediately go to the secondary arm. From here, we control it. We move our body out to the side. There's the leg positioning that I favor. When he goes to yank out, quite difficult. When he goes to push in, quite difficult. And then from here, the elbow goes over, we extend the body away, and we get a nice Urigatami out of a T Kimura position. We've been spending a considerable amount of time in the T Kimura position. There's a reason for this, because T Kimura is one of the absolute cornerstones of my whole approach to the Kimura lock. T Kimura is what enables a good athlete to take an uncontrolled scramble situation and turn it into a win in a reliable and systematic fashion. Once you get into the T Kimura position, your opponent's options are limited to one thing. He can't turn away, physically impossible. Can't stay where he is, that's tactically stupid. Just come up and pin him. He's got to turn into you. That creates a clear battle for elbow position. It's a pretty easy battle to win. Even when you lose the battle and your opponent gets all the way up to the knees, there's still good things we can do from that position. So far, all the attacks we've seen involve the use of my bottom knee scooting underneath my opponent. Now we're going to switch direction. We're going to go to the use of the top leg to keep our opponent's shoulders on the mat. Let's have a look first at what I mean by top leg attacks, and then we'll start going into the attacks. Okay, we've been looking at the T Kimura position, and so far we've seen everything's about this battle for the lever of my opponent's elbow. As he tries to turn into me, we can use that leverage to our advantage. As he fights to get up, space develops for my bottom knee to penetrate. Okay, and from here we've seen a large number of very useful attacks from this position. A very different, very alternative method of operating from this position is just don't bring in the bottom knee. Rather, bring the top knee over as a cross face. When I use my top knee as a cross face, when Mateus goes to get up, he's fighting my leg with his head. It's a difficult battle for him to win. And as a result, it's pretty easy for me to keep his shoulders down on the mat. Let's have a look at the same thing from a slightly different angle. We'll line up with the camera, Mateus. So, T Kimura position, just like so. As Mateus goes to get up, he explodes up. We use the elbow lever to keep him down, and then we throw the top knee over the top. Now it functions as a cross face. When he tries to get up, he's fighting against the strength of my legs. Now, you should know there's some rather low percentage strangulation finishes from here that involve scissoring the legs. I'm not going to say these moves are impossible to operate with. They can work, but they're somewhat low percentage, so I'm not particularly interested in showing them to you. A much better way for us to operate is to come up into high percentage Kimura attacks. So what we're going to do from here, as my opponent goes to struggle to get back up to his base, we're going to use that cross-face leg to actively keep his shoulders down to the mat. We're going to put our head on the floor, and we're going to use our bottom leg. Watch my right foot. My right foot goes to the floor and brings me over so that his hand goes inside my knee. You've probably guessed where we're going. You'll remember that earlier in the video, we spent a lot of time in what we called the cross Kimura position. Well, we're going right to a cross Kimura out of T Kimura. All I do is I use my opponent's elbow as a lever to bring his back off the mat. As his back comes off the mat, I curl my foot to the outside position, and I use the Kimura to bring him over and throw my leg over his fist. From here, it's a simple thing to either lock a triangle or simply close my legs. His arm is now caught inside mine. As a result, we can put finishing pressure with a pull. If my opponent elects to roll through, we will let it happen and continue the attack. But the way we continue it is to take our leg over our training partner's head and then roll through. So this time, as he comes up to his base, he's locked in something like a triangle, what we call a trap triangle. A trap triangle is a triangle without a figure of four. Now I bring his elbow up to the shoulder line. I keep his hand inside my leg, and as a result, we get a shockingly strong finish. We'll be looking in more detail later in this video at the idea of triangles linked to Kimuras. Suffice it to say for now, they satisfy one of the elements of the trinity of power that we looked at earlier in this video, head control. If I can control my opponent's head, the power that I can impart upon the Kimura dramatically increases. Between the cross Kimura and the tri Kimura, you're going to get tremendous amounts of pressure upon your opponent's arm and get into strong finishes. Let's look at the idea of going into these incredibly strong Kimura options that utilize elements that we saw earlier in the video. The idea of bringing the elbow up to the shoulder line, the idea of controlling the head. These are what greatly amplify the power of any given Kimura attack. We're looking at them in the context of a T Kimura situation. So we've seen from here, once we get that T Kimura, my opponent more or less has to turn up into me. Okay. As he does so, we use the elbow lever to keep him down, and then we use top knee crossface to hold him down. So if he tries to come up, he's coming up directly into a crossface. It's not an easy thing to come up into. Now from here, I bring my head as a post to the mat. I pop up and I put my knee over my training partner's fist. I use the Kimura to drag him up off the floor, and we end up in what we call the cross Kimura. 2 legs across my opponent's back in a position where his elbow is taken all the way up to the shoulder line, a classic form of amplifying Kimura pressure. From here I can lock a triangle, you can work with cross feet, you can do whatever you want. But the main thing is that the pull of the elbow in this position creates tremendous braking pressure. Okay, my opponent's only real option now is to pitch forward and roll. When he does so, we just accept the roll. Now from here, I backstep with my leg and I go over my training partner's shoulder. Now, I commit down into a second roll through. When I catch my training partner in this trap triangle position, it's a triangle without a figure of 4, just my 2 feet locked around. When he goes to roll through a second time, it's not going to happen. The trap triangle makes it almost impossible. Now, as always, we bring the elbow to the shoulder line, and from here, we get tremendous braking pressure from bottom position. In this way, we can take the Kimura position, use that top knee control to enter into some devastating Kimura attacks. A short topic that I wanted to cover as we went through the Kimura system is the relationship between 2 different moves, which are close enough that they're related in a way which ought to be covered in any kind of instructional video on Kimura. This is the relationship between Kimura as a submission hold, which is an attack on the joints of the human body, and the bicep slicer, which is an attack on muscle fibers and in some extreme cases even the bones of the forearm. Let's have a look at this relationship and how it pertains to your use of Kimura. We're going to start from a side Kimura position and look at this bicep slicer and contrast it with Kimura action. So we have a training partner who's down, and we've managed to secure some kind of Kimura grip on our training partner, but for whatever reason we're having a very hard time bringing his back off the ground so that we can apply a pulling dominant Kimura. Okay, it might be because he's strong and he's kept his hands here on his in front of him, or it might be just I just couldn't get his back off the floor. I'll look at it in a situation where he's kept his hand, maybe his hands are locked, for example, and I couldn't get the hands down to the floor. So what I'm going to focus on is taking my pulling arm, the frame arm as it's often called, and bringing it up so that my wrist goes over the top of my training partner's forearm. Okay, I don't want my wrist lower than his forearm. My first thing is to get my wrist higher than the forearm, just like so. And then I curl my wrist around. Let's say this is Mateus's forearm. I'm going to put my wrist over the forearm and curl my wrist over so that my wrist sits on top of his forearm. That's a very important detail. Okay, so he's got that strong position and I flick my hand through. Now, instead of taking my hand to his wrist, the conventional push hand position, I'm going to go through and we're going to grab our own bicep. Conventionally, most people will teach you to grab elbow just like so. Okay, that's not wrong. It can definitely work, but it's not the optimal grip. The optimal grip in these situations is for me to lift my elbow and go through and grab my training partner's shoulder. Here. Mateus will tell you that the moment I transition from a grip on my own elbow to a grip on the shoulder, everything tightens up. It's a significantly tighter grip than this much looser one here. Okay, so the traditional grip is adequate, it will work, but not nearly as devastating as coming through here. A big part of the reason is because when I move my elbow forward, I'm going elbow to elbow. Now we know from earlier in this video that elbow to elbow position is a big part of Kimura success. It's also a big part of bicep slicer success. We also know that if we can come up to our training partner's shoulder line, that's a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to put my hand underneath and put myself in a stronger leverage position, elbow to elbow, instead of the classical elbow to armpit. So again, I release my elbow, elbow to elbow position, and then reinforce it by grabbing his elbow. Now, I'm currently My hips are currently on the right side of Mateus's head. I'm going to put my body around the corner and put my hips on the other side of Mateus's head, and I'm going to walk around the corner. From this position, I apply a pressure that goes directly on the bones of the forearm. When Mateus tries to hold me off and lock his hands defensively and all those things that people do, it's so hard for him to prevent what it has to be said is very intimidating submission pressure. You literally feel the bones of your forearm are bending underneath the stress of the hold to the point where there's some danger of them breaking. Let's have a look at this again. So we have a strong opponent who's done a good job of keeping his hands in front. We know that these anterior positions make it very difficult for us to get breaking pressure using conventional methods. So we're going to slip away into a bicep slicer instead of a classical Kimura finish. The essential nature of the bicep slicer is that having established that pulling arm position, my wrist goes higher than his wrist. Okay, so that's the position that I want. Okay, Mateus will tell you just that wrist position alone creates a shocking amount of pressure. Okay, just that false grip over the top of the forearm. When I go through and lock his arm in place, initially I just grab at the elbows. I do that just to slow things down. But ultimately, I've got to get to the end of the lever. Okay, here I'm selling myself short in terms of leverage potential. My elbow is a long way from his elbow. But if I move around the corner and I sweep my elbow to his and then fill the void with my hand on the shoulder, now you're much closer to the end of the lever. If I just stayed on this side, you could put pretty scary pressure on your training partner. It's good. Okay, you'll finish a lot of people just staying on this side of the center line. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with staying on this side of the center line. It's good. But you will put even more pressure if you move past the center line all the way around here. And now when I lift off the floor, you get a truly intimidating lock that puts severe pressure on the bones of the forearm and also the muscles surrounding the area. Let's have a look one more time at this bicep slicer, and we'll give it a little more context in terms of when and where we might use it. Okay, let's say for example we're here, we've got a strong opponent, we've pulled them up and we've locked a Kimura, but we just cannot get the hands separated. Okay, so we're going to punch through and we're going to go over the top and lock our own bicep. Okay, because my wrist is in that strong position on top of my training partner's forearm, it's a pretty easy thing for me now to go down to the floor. Okay, so if we were in, say for example, a dorsal position and I couldn't separate my training partner's arms, wasn't succeeding in this position, I go through and I lock. Now please notice the way in which I lock. I never naively let go and then have Mateus just yank his arms down towards the floor and he's gone. Okay, that's not the idea. When I go through here, look how I get my hand position here and I just thread straight through. So at no point did I let go of Mateus's arm. Okay, so there's my hand position and we thread through. Now when he goes to pull everything down to the mat, it's not going anywhere. I post my hand on the floor, I move my body around the corner and my elbow goes to his elbow and I grab his shoulder. Okay, once I move up to the shoulder line, from here we quickly get breaking pressure. Even more so when we walk past our training partner's center line, and from here the pressure is truly intimidating. Done in this way, we can put a nice addition to your regular Kimura attacks with these bicep slicer variations.